Hello everyone and welcome to WHU Inside Business, reporting to you from beautiful Vallendar. I am Philipp Hoffmann and I'm joined today by Fabian Kienbaum from Cologne. Fabian is the CEO of Kienbaum Consultants International, a consulting agency that empowers people and organizations for the working world of tomorrow. Kienbaum has 600 employees, celebrated its 75th birthday this year, and is led in the third generation by Fabian Kienbaum. Welcome to WHU Inside Business, Fabian. How are you today?
Great. Thanks, Philipp, for having me. Pleasure to be with you.
Nice to hear that. And today we want to speak about a topic that impacted everybody in 2020, and that's new work. So nowadays, everybody knows what home office is and what working remotely means. So Fabian, you worked on the topic for years, and together with your company Kienbaum, you published papers, made conferences, and even wrote a book. So could you give us a quick definition of what is new work? And perhaps leaving COVID out of the picture for now, how has it developed during the last years?
Yeah, happy to do so. So basically, the term new work goes back to a German who immigrated to the US at some point. I don't know, at least he's German born, Austrian German born. His name is Fridtjof Bergmann. And I think he came up with that term during the 80s or something, when the industrial production facilities in and around Detroit were about to change due to automation. And the question he raised back then was, okay, given the fact that the working world as we know it in the place we're currently in will change significantly going forward, in terms of work, what is that what we really want? So basically, if you look it up, that is the origin, that is the basic root of new work. And since then, of course, the world indeed has changed dramatically over the past centuries. And when we nowadays talk about new work, what comes to our mind is that in the simplest definition, the way we consume information, I don't know, any sort of products, the way we interact with each other in our private life, how can this be projected to the working world? And what comes along with it is that the idea of individualization becomes much more important in a working context. The question of in what kind of environment do we work? Are we still linked to an office or can we work from everywhere? The question about what sort of leadership is really needed in that so-called VUCA world that we're currently living in. What kind of flexibility can organizations grant? And obviously, what kind of structures do we want to have in terms of are we looking for network solutions, or it is more a hierarchical characterized working world? So if you take this all into a nutshell, this is basically what new work is about. It is about culture, it is about leadership, it is about structure. And every mega trend we see in the world is relevant for the question, how are we going to work in the future?
That's very interesting. And as you mentioned, I think one question that changed now is the thing you said regarding working remotely. Mm-hmm. So I would like to ask you, how has Corona changed the game? And perhaps, as some people may ask, will we ever come back from home office?
To answer the second question, I think going forward, we will have more or less a hybrid working world. And what is meant by that is that in terms of especially knowledge workers, we will see much more flexibility in terms of the way office space are used and what kind of flexibility is granted towards people. And this is all based on trust. And coming back to the first question, I think in terms of the trust game, as I would like to call it, this is one of the main changes. Prior to COVID-19, very often new work was solely linked to the question, what kind of office spaces do we want to design? How is the architecture supposed to look like? And of course, people ask questions about structure and leadership and culture, but basically, very often we saw these beautiful working places, which were not really used because the working places and the idea behind it did not really fit to the lived culture. And what has changed during the pandemic was that suddenly there was a moment where people really had to grant this trust, because you couldn't really, like speaking in an old-fashioned definition of leadership, you could not really control your peers, you could not really control your co-workers, your colleagues as a boss. Yeah, so as to put that term very simple. And this, I think, is one of the basic changes. What we saw is that trust has become super important, and due to the fact that we are only linked digitally, hierarchies have decreased in that sense that now as we speak, you and me, you see, we're equal. There are no signs of power whatsoever, given the size of my office, the place I'm usually sitting at when we meet in a conference room, the car you might see, which I use when I come to the office, the parking lot, which is being given to me. You see, all this kind of power, they have vanished. And for that reason, these are two basic developments and changes that we see. And they are very important going forward, because you need that kind of trust. And for that reason, to put it on a meta level, leadership in that term and the way and the skill we can really interact with each other, that is the new superpower. You need that trust. You need to build up relationships with your colleagues, with your peers. You need empathy to really know how people feel when they are working from home, not having that social community which we see when we come to a working place. And this is really where companies and organizations differ. Those who perform very well, they have put a lot of emphasis into this piece of building these strong relationships, having strong bonds, although we are digitally separated, versus those who have not yet put too much efforts into building these relationships. And the stronger the relationships, the better the teams as such can perform, and in turn, the superior results you will produce as an organization.
Very interesting. So you mentioned the trust game. I think you mentioned what you also tell servant leadership.
Yeah.
And relationship building.
Yes.
So for me as a student, it would be very interesting now what I could do now to succeed in this new world, and perhaps build a company or work in a company that has really success tomorrow, or in the next years.
In my opinion, one of the best developments we have seen so far in the past few years is that the entry barriers to starting a new venture, to build a new company are very little. And for that reason, when you have your passion, when you see something, when you feel purpose in doing something, it is relatively easy to start a venture with friends, with colleagues, with people who share the same interests. So that is something which has changed significantly over the past few years, and that is, I think, important insofar as when you're during studies and when you somehow realize what you're really interested in, you can really follow that passion. And this is today it is easier than it used to be. I think that is really, really important, and I think it's a good development. The second point I'd like to emphasize is that given the fact that the world is not really in a shape as it used to be several years down the line. Things are changing so dramatically in such a velocity that you need to prepare for that. So another superpower I'd like to put into the discussion is resilience. You probably need that resilience, whatever you're going to do, because even if you start a venture, you might not be successful, but at least you've tried. And at least you followed the path of passion. I think this is super important, and this is one of the main changes I see, due to the fact that climate, sustainability, but also meaningfulness have become much more important, especially for a younger generation. You shouldn't do something which you might have done because your parents ask you to do it, or you think that you can make a lot of money with it. If that is your basic motivation, go for it. Potentially, you might find consulting or investment banking interesting. But my advice, given the world we are in, we really have to put all the power we have into something which equals our passion. And I would go for that because this is much more important, and we have to put a lot of effort into it, keeping our competitiveness within Europe and especially Germany. And for that reason, all the skilled people out there, do what you love and do it with those who share your interests.
So could you perhaps shortly go more deep into the point of building purpose and also perhaps gaining the skill of resilience? Because I think, yeah, it's not that feasible for a lot of people. So what could we do to go forward, or perhaps how did you gain those insights?
I think there are two approaches. The first one really is when you're about to make a decision what you want to do in life, and due to the fact that we spend the majority of our lifetime with working, it should be a wise decision, and especially at the beginning of a career. So this is the first approach with regard to purpose. What is your own purpose, or what is your personal North Star, or however you want to call it? So really have a feeling for what your desire is. This is sometimes not really easier, so you really have to think about it, and obviously it has to match your personality. So this is the first approach. What really drives you? Sometimes it really helps to just write it down and maybe to have different options where the path might go. But then on the second hand, the second approach obviously is finding an institution, an organization, however you want to call it, where you see yourself mirrored. And very often you do not see yourself mirrored with an organization per se, because that is abstract, but with the people who form that institution organization, because people follow people. And the more of your inner passion you see within those people which you might want to join for a certain mission, the better the matches, and the better you can find out where your passion lies. I think these are the two basic approaches in terms of purpose. Know yourself very well, but then at the same hand, looking for matches. And in terms of resilience, this is something then really which comes along automatically, because if you know your inner strength, and if you have that inner wisdom, if you really know where your own place is, especially in the working world, but also within your private life and with your family, the stronger you become automatically, because you know where your place is. You are not just being a follower due to the fact that you have the impression that you have to meet certain expectations from your surroundings and your developments. You do what you love. Whenever you do what you love, the resilient superpower comes along with it automatically. And I think this is very important, especially at the beginning of a career, just to think about. You might make mistakes, or maybe you just want to experience something because you're unsure where you want to go. That's absolutely fine. I mean, we're working for at least, I don't know, 35 or 40 years, but probably it helps you. It can be, you can try, yeah, but it can help you, giving you the conviction where you want to go. And when you have conviction, you can develop stance. And when you have that stance as a personality, you really become a convincing one. I'm pretty sure. And this is something I would share with you. Looking back now for the past 10 years, it has helped me. Probably for me, it is easier because we're a family-owned company, and it has ever been a privilege and an honor to me to serve our company in that context. And what is meant by that is knowing about the fact that many amongst us are privileged. How can we give back? And giving back, and seeing other people grow, and having an impact with our organization. This is what drives me. And for that reason, luckily it is rather easy, but these would be my pieces of advice.
Wow, thank you. Great insight. So I would like to actually dive into another area now that's more related to our main topic. And yeah, as I said before, you wrote a book on money and compensation in the age of digitalization. And when I read through the abstract, I stumbled across an hypothesis you proved there.
Mm-hmm.
And it is money will lose importance as a meaningful and action guiding element. So I think some students listening will have to sit down now and take a deep breath, because they will think, if money doesn't matter in the future, why am I even studying? So what you would tell the students, and what were the most significant findings in your research in terms of the role of money?
So when I studied, I remember quite well that, I don't know what the lecture was called, probably organizational psychology or something like that. I don't know. Behavioral economics. I'm not sure anymore, but I remember quite well. Studies said that in the end, you are more productive and you're also happier when you follow the path of your intrinsic motivation. So when your intrinsic motivation is being met, then you're more productive. Versus, and this leads me then to the money question, the extrinsic motivation, bonuses, perks, whatever comes along with it, I don't know, car allowances, you name it, will not bring you in the end to that level. And simply put, I'd say money will always be important, especially when you invest a lot during studies. Probably you have the intention of paying back. But the idea behind that concept is that people tend to compare. For that reason, it is a so-called hygiene factor. So when you know the environment you're working in and where you can really contribute and what impact your work has, and that you're being seen as a personality, and you know at the same time that you are being rewarded adequately, and adequately means in comparison to your peers, to your colleagues within that organization, but probably also with regard to the market. And this is then a decision you make at the very beginning. So you join a company, and if you have the impression that you're being treated fairly, and fairly means is that you know the conditions, you know there is transparency, you know that there are no deals which you are not aware of. If all this is there, it makes much more easier to know just I'm being paid adequately to what I give and where my contribution is. And this gives me a feeling of fairness. Very often we see that when we study, like, okay, what comes along with it, how can there be really a fair compensation? It is the question like, okay, how is performance being measured at the end, you see? But even then, if the process is clear, if the curves are clear, yeah, when you compare like a whole group, then people buy into it. And I think this is very important to keep in mind. And it has become less important these days because we are in a very saturated, wealthy working world, and also the place we've grown up is like a really we're wealthy, so in total terms, and for that reason, due to the fact that we see like a lot of social developments, a lot of social problems, it has become just less important. But fairness is the most important aspect when we talk about that. Could I make it clear what comes along with it, the basic notion?
Crazy, yeah, I think so. Contribution to maybe also put it together to a purpose for an individual, and also being treated fair are more important than just the absolute number on my page.
Exactly.
I think
yes,
that's
exactly.
The point you want
yeah.
to make.
Yes.
So very nice. Thank you for that insight again. And so for everyone who would like to hear more from Fabian, he is actually a German podcast named Pioniere wie wir. You can just Google it and you will be able to listen to it on the Kienbaum website. And at the end of his podcast, Fabian always likes to ask a question to his guests. We would like to ask to him now. And that question is, could you tell us a secret you have never told anybody before? And to render it perhaps in regards of business or success or something like this, do you have an answer to that question, Fabian?
I have told my wife, but only my wife, so I think it's slightly okay. Just kidding, but what I'd really like to do, what I'm thinking about is starting whatsoever, I don't know, political engagement. I'm not sure what it could look like, but this is something which I have in mind. I love being an entrepreneur, but at the same time, I think that we have to strengthen the ties, not only between politics and economy, but also scientists and a lot of disciplines. And this is something which I have back in my mind and which I have not yet told publicly.
Cool. Thank you very much. So first of all, I want to thank you, Fabian, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate your stories and insights.
Thank you, Philipp. It was a pleasure.
Thank you also to our viewers and listeners out there for tuning in. From all of us here at WHU Inside Business, we will see you next time.